joined this afternoon by Mr. Mike Keith. 1999 was his first year of play-by-play for the Tennessee Titans. 2021 Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame inductee. 2020 Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame inductee, and 11 times Tennessee Sportscaster of the Year. Mike, how are you?
Drew, it's great to be at Hillsborough. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're definitely very excited. A room full of very hopeful, AV students or broadcasting students, and we'll start right there. Obviously, a room full of high schoolers and all looking to go to college and making the right decision on college. You attended the University of Tennessee. How important is it for these students and myself to pick the right university? Why is college important in a broadcasting or audiovisual career?
Two things. When I interviewed for the Titans job, they asked me one question about college. They asked me, do you have a 4-year degree? They didn't ask me where I went. They didn't ask me what I majored in. Fortunately, they didn't ask me about my GPA. But what they did ask me is, do you have a 4-year degree? And in the business of broadcasting and in a lot of other businesses, it is a separator. And I was able to tell them, yes, I had a 4-year degree, and I was very thankful at that point because I left school after 3 years, got married, had a full-time job, and eventually, after a few months, I said, I think I want to finish. So I went back and I did 40 hours of college work in about 13 months. And at the moment that I interviewed for the Titans job and they asked me about the 4-year degree, I was very thankful that I did. So I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's my opinion. I'm just sharing my experience with you in that way so you'll know that that does tend to be a separator. Picking the right college is massively important for what opportunities are. Because if you want to work in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the truck, wherever you want to work, you want to go somewhere that there are practical application opportunities while you're in school. I mean, what everybody's doing here today is fantastic experience. It puts you ahead of the game. So when you go to a place like, say, where I went, the University of Tennessee, you can walk in your first day on campus and say, I would like to work with the production team that does all of the SEC network production for the University of Tennessee. And they will hire you immediately because you already have experience. And that SEC network experience that the 14 SEC schools can provide you is so big because a lot of what you're doing, at first you're not getting paid for. But then, as the seasons move on, and when the ESPN crews come in, or the CBS crews come in, or whomever it is that comes in at that point, they will hire you and they will pay you. And not only do you get the practical experience, but you make incredible contacts. And for me, the way I got on with the Vol Radio Network is I went to work at the student radio station. I would say to you, even if you're not interested in radio, you want a place like the University of Tennessee that has a fabulous student radio station, because that's a place where you can get a ton of work, and once you can show that work and you can show that you're willing to do something, but most importantly that you'll continue to show up, then you meet some people and you have a chance to get hired. And that's what happened to me. John Ward hired me my sophomore year based on what I had done my entire freshman year working at the student radio station.
Yeah, sure. And a lot of these people, as you mentioned, we got great people working behind the camera today. A lot of people in this room are not interested in a broadcasting career. So if you're not one of the 32 play-by-play announcers in the NFL, or you're not interested in play-by-play, how important is it to get that behind the scenes work in college before you get to that big one? Well,
I mean, it's big. I mean, even if you don't want to go into broadcasting, I mean, even if you want to work, say concerts, if you want to work sound on a concert tour, or you want to work for a company that puts on different conventions and productions and things of that sort, the work for everyone in those businesses is job to job. You may work for one company that pays your salary, and that's great, or you may work freelance where you work on a movie set, or you work on a television series, or you do something for the Today Show, or you go out and tour with Taylor Swift for the whole time. That's still about connections. And if you go to school and you have the opportunity to work on a broadcast production, even if that's not what you want to do in your life, if I meet you and I say, Drew, you did a great job working with me, come do this job. And you say, but Mike, I'm not qualified. It doesn't matter, because I know you work hard, I know you show up, we can teach you that job. The business of anything related to production is about connections. Going to class, getting grades, getting a degree, all important, but it's really about the connections, because people hire the people that they know and can count on. My first job was I pulled cable as a freshman for University of Tennessee basketball telecasts. They used to tape the basketball games at Stokely Athletic Center, and then they would show the games back on replay on Saturday night. Well, my job was I was a cable puller, and if you watch a basketball game, there's a camera at center court, right? And that follows the action back and forth. And then there are cameras in what they call the end zones under the baskets. Well, the camera person is generally on a sliding chair. Even today, with all the technology changes, the camera person is on a chair that has rollers. And so they'll move up and down the baseline to get various shots. Well, in order that they don't fall out of the chair, somebody has to be behind them feeding them cable. You gotta make sure, because if they don't, they'll flip out of their chair. And listen, they will be very concerned about the camera person's health. They will be much more concerned about the health of the camera itself, because they're very expensive. So it's a big deal for that person to do the job. So that's what I did. I did it for a basketball game. I didn't get paid. I got into the game, obviously was on the baseline, which I thought was just great seats. And then I got like a hot dog and a Coke at halftime or something like that. Well, they had a home game the next weekend, and I showed up. And the guy who was doing the crewing said, "You came back." And I said, "Well, yeah, I came back." Because people don't usually come back. They usually do one game, and then they never show up again, because it's really not that fun. I said, "But yeah, this is what I want to do." And it was from there, because I came back, that they kept hiring me to do different things. I became like a gopher for the talent, which is where I met John Ward. Go get him a Coke, or go get him but you meet those people in different ways. But the decision they made on me wasn't that I was the best cable puller they'd ever seen. It was that I showed up. And so many people don't show up. They decide to do something else. My biggest break in the business came later that year, when a guy who was supposed to cover a roast chose not to go because it was a Friday night and he had a date. And he just told me, he goes, "I'm not coming to that." So I went, filled in for him, did okay. And then from then on, I became the beat reporter for football, and he got moved to track and field on the show that we were on at the time. And obviously at Tennessee, the football's the big deal. Again, not because I was special, but because I was available and I showed up. That's the number one thing you have to learn, really, in any business. But if you want to work at anything production related, broadcast or otherwise, you get crewed because you're willing to show up. And you will always get crewed for that reason. And you will continue to move up the ladder because you become a person they can count on.
Yeah, and you talked about your past. We talked about where you went to college and why that was important and all that good stuff. But obviously what people know you for now is the voice of the Tennessee Titans. You started with the Tennessee Titans when they were the Oilers back in 1996, and all the accolades up to this point let's talk about how you got started with the Titans. How did you get started with the Tennessee Oilers? Where did you start, and how have you worked your way up to be one of the better sportscasters in Tennessee history?
So I was working in Knoxville. By the way, thanks for saying that. I was working in Knoxville at a radio station known as WIVK. And our company got the rights to carry the Oilers once they moved to Tennessee. And so I was working a Tennessee basketball broadcast that night. We played the 9:30 game, and so I was there very late. I did the scoreboard for John Ward, back at the Big Orange scoreboard. They would throw it to me. And I was 28. And my boss came in, and he was never in late at night, and he said, hey, what's going on? I said, what's going on? What are you doing here? And he had been in Nashville helping our Nashville stations get the rights to the Oilers games. Because the two stations that carried the games, or the two stations in Nashville that we had, I should say, 103 WKDF and 104.5 WGFX, they were both rock and roll stations. So they had no sports people, and yet they were going to carry the professional football team once it moved here. So when my boss left, it was after midnight, and I walked back into our sales area. We had one computer at that time. I had no internet, but we had one computer. And I typed a letter to the president of our company, and I said, if there's anything I can do, I want to do it. Because I'm from Nashville, I love professional football, and honestly, I didn't think John Ward was ever going to retire. I thought John Ward would go on forever as the voice of the Vols, and so I didn't think there was any way I would ever move up, and I thought, maybe I can get in the mix over there, have a chance to move back home, who knows. So the first year, they let me do a 15-minute show for Mid-South radio stations that carried the final year of the Houston Oilers. And that 15-minute show was important because it provided 6 minutes of local commercials for the stations in Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi to be able to sell. The next year, I was the scoreboard host. That was the Memphis year, 1997. And then in early 1998, they offered me a job to move here, and I moved here. I did color commentary with Joe McConnell in 1998, and then they wanted kind of a fresh, new approach once we became the Titans. I was very fortunate that I was a John Ward protege, and Tennessee had just won the national championship in football, and John Ward was the biggest thing imaginable, and so they hired me for the job, and that's the way it's been ever since.
Yeah, and you stay on the radio, you have podcasts, you work with multiple different former Titans players over the radio. I guess my next question is, how has the community responded since you've been here since 1999? How important is that community for a good football team, for a good radio program, and all that good stuff? How have you kind of thrived with all these former Titans players coming back and the community starting to kind of love you as the play-by-play?
It's the most important thing we do. Because when we started, we set out from a marketing standpoint and a sales standpoint to be a regional team. And we modeled ourselves after the Chiefs and the Broncos in particular, looked at what the Green Bay Packers did, but they are really unusual because they're the Packers. The Minnesota Vikings sort of do the same thing too. Most NFL teams market within 50 miles of their stadium. Like the Atlanta Falcons, who will play this week, they don't have to market much outside of Atlanta because there's so many people that live in Atlanta. Our situation was different. We were one of the smaller markets in the NFL when we started. We still technically are, but we're really not a small market anymore. But at that time, we knew that there were 11 million people that lived within 3-hour drive. And because we're such big football fans in this region, we had no problems asking them to come see a game. And so we marketed all over the region, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Memphis, Huntsville, Birmingham, Paducah, Owensboro, Bowling Green. And we really sort of settled on that as sort of our template, and it still is. And so we're constantly working to stay connected to people. It's a little harder to get in the car and go everywhere anymore. And COVID changed that a little bit too. I don't travel as much as I once did. I miss that because I used to like to get out and see people. But the way people disseminate information is so different now. It's like we do the Official Titans podcast, the OTP. If you would download that, I would really appreciate it. I mean, if you listen to it, great. But if you just download it, just tell everybody it's fantastic. What do they say? Subscribe, rate, and review, right? It has that catchy name, the OTP. It's a big deal. And like when we went to Europe, when we played a couple weeks ago in London, people stunned me who would come up and say, I'm from Germany, I love the OTP. And when you're on the radio, you don't actually believe anybody listens. I mean, even when you've been doing it 30-something years, you're always shocked when somebody says, hey, I listened to you on the radio. Your response is like, really? Well, when somebody from Germany tells you that, you're really blown away. But you understand when you meet those people what it means to them. Like I've just gotten on Instagram, @10voice, by the way. If you want to add me to that, that'd be great too. @TENN voice. Well, I'm not using it to sell products or to tell you about what my dog's doing today or whatever. I'm trying to show people sort of the behind the scenes of what the job is. Because I didn't feel, people would say, hey, we enjoy following what you do. We'd like to know a little bit more. And so we try to use the Instagram to show people behind the scenes of an interview or of a trip or whatever. That's the connection now. And especially with the new stadium coming in 2027, Drew, it's a huge deal. So I tell everybody that my real job is sales. Anybody who works for the Tennessee Titans, your first job is sales. And that starts with how you handle yourself in the community around people.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get to this video that obviously is kind of cemented you into Tennessee history for one of the best calls. And I'm going to piggyback after what you just said about social media and how important that is and how everything kind of goes through those social media at this point in time. How important is a good social media presence for anybody who's interested in audiovisual production, interested in having a broadcasting career? Why is social media presence important when you're looking for a job or looking to get hired at some of these big time NFL teams, college teams?
It's a piece of what you've got. And you have to see it as such. You got to remember, 40% of this country still doesn't have cable television. You're like, what? You don't see that? They not only don't stream, they only have like 4 channels. That's 40% of the country. Not everybody is on social media. There are people who still go buy a newspaper, a physical newspaper, and read it. So I think the most important thing to remember about that, Drew, is you can't take any part of what you're doing for that connection and ignore it. You can't ignore people who still look at a website. You can't ignore people who want to follow you on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But you also can't stop doing a good TV show. You also can't stop doing a radio broadcast. If you can believe this, our ratings on Titans Radio are better now than they've ever been before. More people listen to us, and you would say, people still listen to the radio? But it's appointment listening. Maybe music radio is vastly different now because we all consume our music so many different ways. But if you have something, and if you're in the car, or you're on the boat, or you're in a tree stand, or you're at a ball practice, or whatever it is you're doing, maybe all you have is radio at that point. And so more people go to that radio because they know they can count on the fact that we're there, and they can hear it. Whereas maybe you can't get Wi-Fi to download the video, but you can always hear the radio. That's the most important thing, is you can't A good social media presence is important. You have to be very careful with that. You must be very careful with that. It's like we traded Kevin Byard this week. And Kevin Byard is somebody that I feel very strongly about as a human being, right? But you have to understand there are two different things with this. We traded Kevin Byard, not because he's a bad person. We traded Kevin Byard because we are changing our philosophy about how certain positions are compensated on our team. He plays safety. We're probably going to spend our money more on cornerbacks going forward instead of safeties. That's how we're redesigning the team right now, is we're putting different premiums on different positions. So it doesn't mean he can't play. It doesn't mean we don't love him. But what it does mean is times change. Well, if you're going on social media, you have to be very careful that when you praise him, that it doesn't look like you're saying to your employer, I'm mad at you for trading this guy. That's the fine line that you walk in terms of even some of the things on social media. I mean, if you do something stupid on social media, it's one thing, and I think we all get that, but there are certain things that are much more, what's the right word? It's sort of a fine point that you might not think about. Subtle is probably the best word. That it can be perceived certain ways, because what you have to remember with social media is there's no context. Sometimes people don't know you're kidding, right? Sometimes people don't understand what your point of view is, where you're coming from, if you say something very bluntly. So, those are the lines you have to walk. I totally understand why they traded. Totally get it. 100%. From a personal standpoint, am I going to miss seeing him in the hall? Absolutely. Who nicknamed him the mayor of Murfreesboro? I did. So I've known him back to the Senior Bowl. I love the guy. But that doesn't change the perception of what the job is, and you have to be professional at the same time. Social media is a place where you could get caught in a moment like that if you're not careful. That your bosses might read your tweet and say, well, I guess he didn't want to be here, or she didn't want to be here. And those are the things that you always have to think about in handling your social media, and also in doing everything else you do.
For sure. And we'll go ahead and play this video behind us, the Music City Miracle Call, one of the best calls in sports history, and if you don't mind, directing your eyes to the screen.
The Titans can win the next 20 Super Bowls. But there will never be a moment in my life like that moment in time when your team has just won one of the most remarkable playoff games in history. And it's the first one ever played. What do you say? As we went through the first year of the Tennessee Titans, we had three goals. We wanted to make the playoffs, we wanted to sell out every game, and we wanted to host a playoff game. And for me, the first year had gone about as well as I could have hoped, because my number one goal in that year was don't get noticed. But it all worked well until we played Buffalo on that Saturday.
From Adelphia Coliseum in Nashville. Hello again, everybody. I'm Mike Keith with Cody Allison, Pat Ryan, and Larry Stone. We're just minutes away from the kickoff between the Titans and Bills.
I over-prepared. I don't remember sleeping. This was my first playoff game. I wanted to be the very best that I could. And the truth is, for the majority of the game, I stunk up the joint. I was terrible. It was far and away my worst broadcast of the year. I thought they were going to fire me after the game.
Set, kick, winds its way down the field. He made it just inside the upright as the Bills are on the verge of coming to Nashville and picking up their 12th win of the season and advancing to the second round.
My goal at that point is don't sound disappointed.
Do the Titans have a miracle left in them in what has been a magical
stood out to me, they had never practiced home run throwback with anything other than a squib kick. So on their end, it was a huge surprise that Christie kicked it up in the air. Massive shock.
Christie kicks it high and short.
I'm just trying to call what I see and keep it as simple as possible.
Going to be fielded by Lorenzo Neal at the 25, and pitches it back to Wycheck.
The greatest thing, in my opinion, about the call is the color commentator, Pat Ryan. He saw immediately that there was no one up the sideline.
He throws it across the field to Dyson.
You got something? I'm like, 30, look, 40, look, 50, look. And then I'm pretty convinced there's not a flag down, and so then I go absolutely nuts.
And he's got it! End zone! Touchdown, Mike! There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle! Tennessee has pulled a miracle! A miracle for the Titans!
I look back at Larry Stone, our executive producer, and he's got tears just streaming down his face, and we just didn't talk for like a minute. That was the moment where we became an NFL city. Everybody knew what it was like and never forgot it. There will never be a moment in my life like that moment in time when your team, the team that took a chance on you, that hired you, and that gave you that incredible opportunity, has just won one of the most remarkable playoff games in history. And it's the first one ever played here. Doesn't get old. Preparation is 95% of it. The ability that we have to utilize technology is what really makes it so great. The Microsoft Surface makes it easy to get to everything. You find a balance of preparation and the ability to be in the moment.
Did you know that was a commercial for Microsoft Surface?
Well, I can kind of tell when I start zooming in on it. Yeah, definitely. And I know some of the students out in the chairs and things like that do have questions. So if you'll just raise your hand, we'll get your question. Ben will come down and put the microphone in front of you. And if no students have a question, Ben, you can start us off.
Here we go, Ben.
What's the worst fan base you've ever had to announce at?
So it's funny, we did the season opener in 2020, or excuse me, we did the season opener in 2000. And we opened the season at Buffalo, right after this had happened. So, 8 months after this happened, we opened the regular season at Buffalo. We're in our production meeting with Jeff Fisher on Friday. Larry Stone and I are sitting there. He goes, let me tell you what I'm going to do. He said, at that time, the opposing team had either their offense or their defense introduced at the other team, at the other team's stadium. Now they don't do that. Now the opposing team just runs out, and the home team will introduce either offense or defense. But he said, we're going to introduce the special teams at Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. And the last three people we're going to introduce, Lorenzo Neal, Frank Wycheck, and Kevin Dyson. Larry looks at him and he goes, Coach, I don't think that's a great idea. He goes, oh no, we're going to do it. So we get there and you don't believe he's really going to do it. And he really does. And when Lorenzo Neal comes out, they start, it's like no booing I've ever heard before in my life. And then when they got to Wycheck, it gets so much worse. And when Dyson was the last one, I thought they were going to pick their chairs up and just throw, it was the most unbelievable reaction I've seen. Well, the problem was, they knew who I was. And, it was just, it was rough. It was rough getting to the bus. It's still not great when we go up there years later. Buffalo's the place for me that's kind of the hardest because they've never quite let that go. There are other favorites. Baltimore's tough, New England's tough, but not quite anything like Buffalo.
Sure. Any other questions, just raise your hand and we'll have Ben get to you. Yeah, go ahead, right here in the front.
When you worked for John Ward, how was the experience? How did it make you feel?
At first, it wasn't great. When I went to work for John, I was so young, I thought I was hired because I was special. And that wasn't it at all. He hired me because I was cheap, because he only had to pay me 25 bucks. So I thought I knew a lot of stuff. And John needed to break me of my thought that I knew what I was doing. I was way too cocky, I was way too sure of myself. And he made it very hard on me. He really did. He broke me. By the time I got to be about 24 or 25, I kind of realized my place and what I didn't know. And then we really formed a bond after that, and I went to see him when I took the Oilers job, and I told him, and he was very supportive. He was very supportive after the fact. Saw him about a month before he died and had a chance to spend some time with him. So it was a relationship almost like that you sometimes have with a parent, where they're very hard on you, and then as you get older, you get closer. I'm very thankful for John because he humbled me a great deal. The other thing he convinced me too is he said, look, because you've got to do what it is you do. You've got to be your style. I would have loved to have been like John. John's so much better than me. I mean, not even close. But I'm not. I'm not the same sort of person. I don't have the same emotions. I don't have the same intelligence. I don't have the same voice. And you know, it sounds like a cliche, but you really have to find your own voice in all of this. And then the public will decide whether you're any good or not. They will decide if they like what you do. They make the ultimate judgment. I mean, it's scary in a way because you have to put yourself out there. And you have to say, I mean, it's like a singer or any sort of performer. You put yourself out there and they let you know if you get to stay or not. And I was very glad he taught me that as well. He's absolutely the biggest influence in my career, and he's the biggest reason I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's not even close. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. Again, just raise your hand right here in front.
I guess my question is, how do you keep the same energy even when the Titans might not be winning?
Well, I think it starts with the fact that you have a job to do, and you've prepared in a way that you understand going into it. You have a story to tell, whatever that story is. And we'll come up with about 5 storylines for every situation, you know, for every game. So you go into it with that. If you've been trained by somebody like John Ward, you've seen how you work through that process. Your job is still to call the game. So there's something right in front of you that is the biggest part of your job, win or lose, or hot or cold, or anything in between. And the other part of it for me is, in growing up in Franklin, I wanted to be a broadcaster worse than anything, but I never thought we'd have an NFL team. We never dreamed this, ever. Never had the first thought that this was even possible. And so when I walk in stadiums on Sundays, even at my age now, I'm still so excited. So I'm getting to do what I love and what I always wanted to do in a way that I never thought possible. And I never stopped thinking that. We're in London, you know, how many days ago was that? 11 days? We're calling a game in London. I'm calling an NFL game in London, England. That's crazy. You know, that to me, it's still crazy. And it's not hard to get fired up for anything. I've done 2 and 14 seasons. I've done a Super Bowl season. Winning's a lot better. It's a lot easier. But it still doesn't change, no matter the record, the excitement I have for the opportunity. So it's all of those things combined. Great question.
So you kind of touched on this before, but what kind of made you want to go into sports broadcasting? Also, what does a storyline mean?
Sure. I mean, I'll take it. What made me want to go into it is I saw a football game when I was 7 years old at the University of Tennessee, and it was everything. It was the band, it was the students, it was the game itself. Tennessee won the game with a dramatic play in the last minute. And some kids love going to the circus. Some kids love going to whatever, and an amusement park, and it fires them up, whatever. That was my circus, that was my amusement park. I walked out of there thinking, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Well, then I started listening to John Ward call games. And Tennessee basketball was better than football at that point. And they had a sophomore named Ernie Grunfeld and a freshman named Bernard King, and they were absolutely phenomenal. First basketball game I ever went to see, they won 103-98. And man, that's real basketball right there. I mean, that was 1975 too. There was no three-point shot. It was crazy. It was just up and down and so much fun. And it was like the combination of all of those things. I said, this is what I'm going to do. I knew from that point on, if you had known me in high school, you would say, I don't know what Jane's going to do for a living. I don't know what Bob's going to do for a living, but I can tell you what Mike Keith's going to do. Everybody knew. Now, nobody thought I would do it at this, especially me, because, I had no idea. I thought I'd probably be calling minor league baseball somewhere, and I'd be just as happy. I call high school games from time to time, and I still love doing that. I love calling ball games. The storylines are simple. I mean, you look at the storylines for this week. We're wearing the Oilers uniforms for the first time since 1998. Who's going to start at quarterback? If it's Will Levis, this is our rookie. You're for that, okay. If it's Will Levis, that's obviously a major storyline because this is what you drafted him to do. You're playing the Atlanta Falcons, who are coached by Arthur Smith, who was with us for 10 years. We know Arthur very well. What's the secondary going to be like without Kevin Byard? So those are 4 storylines, plus the trade deadline is coming up on Tuesday. Are we going to trade anybody else, or are we going to trade for somebody? So all of those things factor in to what you're going to try to lay out during the course of the day. And some of them won't take shape, But if we give up a long pass because the new safety was in the wrong position, or if the new safety intercepts 3 passes in his first game replacing Kevin Byard, those are the things you're always trying to look at to sort of build on. And you have those thoughts going in. You put them down on paper, you share them with the entire crew. Because if you're in the car and you've got a 3-hour drive, we're going to keep going back to the things that are most important for you to follow. Not only those, but time and score, down and distance, where we are. Because our goal is to have you be a person who doesn't touch the radio for 3 hours. That's the goal. Not easy to do. But I'd love for you to be able to say 3 hours just went by like the blink of an eye. I got from Nashville to Memphis, and I don't remember any of the drive because I was listening to the game. That's the goal.
So I know you said this was your dream job, and you love to do this, but has there ever been a time where you contemplated not doing this anymore?
Not here. I mean, there was a point in my life when I turned 30 and we were still in Knoxville that I didn't think I wanted to do it anymore because it was too hard on my family. The thing that people realize very quickly about any job in sports, broadcasting or otherwise, is it's nights and it's weekends and it's travel. It's very hard on a family. And when I got this opportunity, it was so different from the job that I had before because I was home most every night. You're gone on weekends, but we leave 2 o'clock on Saturday for Indianapolis, and then Sunday we're home by 7 o'clock. So you're not even gone that much over 24 hours. That's not the bad part. The bad part's when you're doing baseball and you're gone for 6 straight days. The bad part's when you're doing basketball and you're gone for, basically a week at a time. And it's hard because you want to see your daughter grow up, you want to see your son grow up, you want to be with your wife, you want to have a normal life to a certain point, you like to go see a movie or a concert. To a certain extent, it's hard, especially when you're starting out. And for me, this job was such a blessing, not just because it was the Titans, it's because it's a very normal routine. I've had to miss some things over the years, but I didn't have to miss very much, and I was very thankful for that.
About your work, he's your idol. You wanted to be like him, but he gave you this advice. You have to be you. You've got to do what you do. And you learn from that. So, what is your advice for someone that is passionate about something?
I mean, it's so brutal because he was so eloquent. Everything was so smooth. It was great. I'm kind of screechy and annoying and, when I get excited, everybody in broadcasting hates their voice. Everybody. I've never met it. I met one guy who did. He was obnoxious. But most people who are in any sort of broadcasting hate their own voice. And I wish I had a big, deep baritone and that I was very under control all the time. But I'm not. I'm just not. And the moment I stopped trying to be what I was not is when I got better. Because then I could focus on the things that I really could control that were important. Broadcasters are personal to their audience. The fans like their broadcaster because they connect with their broadcaster on the emotion of what the situations are. How you get there is often very different. How John did it was totally different. Like 1998, Tennessee's playing Florida, and the game goes into overtime. Tennessee kicks a field goal to go ahead by 3 points. Florida is unable to score a touchdown, so they're forced to kick a field goal. And the kick is no good. John Ward's call of that was, no, sir-ree. No, sir-ree. No, sir-ree. That's all he did. And it's iconic to Tennessee fans. Totally iconic. What I would have done would have sounded like a guy jumping out of the booth, setting himself on fire with gasoline. It would have been totally different. But because it was John, it was perfect. Georgia had an announcer by the name of Larry Munson, who worked the first 16 years of his career here in Nashville. And he was completely different than John, but Georgia fans loved him just as much. And he would talk like this, and he would say things like, all right, I got that big back Stewart back there that pictured the ball. We got him in the backfield. We got him. We don't got him. We don't got him. Touchdown, Tennessee. That's an 80-yard run. He didn't tell you the distance. He didn't tell you that. But to Georgia fans, they knew what he was talking about. Totally different. John Ward and Larry Munson could not have been closer. Really good friends. Totally different people. And you have to embrace that, Because when I was coming out, there were all these guys trying to emulate about 2 or 3 announcers. And those guys didn't go anywhere, even though they sounded good, but they didn't catch anyone's imagination. They didn't tell a story. They were just talking. You can't be just talking. All right, hit me, Will.
Would you say the Titans are rebuilding?
No, I don't think so. I know everybody thinks that, but I don't think so.
Go right here, Ben. Go right here behind you.
It's a fair question. I think we're retooling what we're doing based on the fact that our salary cap structure as we go forward is going to be different. I think the money is going to be allocated differently. I mean, the tough thing right now is the safety play has not been very dramatic to this point in terms of interceptions. And Hooker has an interception. He also has a forced fumble. Byard had mostly been making tackles. And I don't think it's because Kevin can't play anymore. I think it's because the game and what you need coverage-wise has totally changed. And so I think you will see them continue to put more resources in different places. The game is moving more outside, and you're going to build from outside in instead of building from inside out. So that's really what I think is the case. I think we have just as good a chance to win on Sunday as we did before we made the trade. And it doesn't really have anything to do with, I mean, you heard what I said earlier. I love Kevin. I think he's a super player. But it's a different, we're having to retool to catch up with where the game is and how it's changed over the last 3 years in particular.
My class did some research in preparation of this meeting, and most of our research saw that you were inducted in 5 Hall of Fames, but we couldn't find which they were.
Well, that's because it's not something I put in my bio or have, you know. I'm flattered by it. I mean, my high school put me in, and I'm in the University of Tennessee's Baseball Hall of Fame, which I'm very appreciative of. Was dumbfounded that happened, but I started with that program when they just took off. The TSSAA put me in the Hall of Fame as a contributor because we at the Titans have done a lot of work to promote high school sports through Mr. Football and through supporting the Blue Cross Bowls and just everything else we do. And I was really the guy who got the glory for that, but that's really about our whole organization, which I'm really proud of. Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame, which was a really nice thing, and then the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame, which was a big shock. That was really special. I've hosted their dinner for over 20 years, their awards dinner, and they're kind enough to put me in. I was really, really, really surprised. But that kind of stuff is so, I mean, Mike Vrabel got inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame this weekend, our coach. And we're so proud of him, you know, because, I mean, it's a great accomplishment. He was a super football player, and he absolutely deserves it. He was one of the best players of one of the best teams of all time. And Mike says, when we congratulated him, he said, I'm flattered and I'm thankful and I'm not giving it back, but I really don't know what to say. And I totally understand that. I'm flattered and I'm grateful and I'm not giving them back, but I don't know what you say. I'm very thankful and very appreciative.
Sure. So you look at back when you started, you know, obviously it's changed a lot today, and you have people like Drew and Ben who are, you know, total nerds and completely intertwined with broadcasting business. So what are successful steps that they can take? You know, obviously they have the podcast and stuff like that, but what are successful steps they can take in the future that would, you know, help them become, you know, bigger?
Well, Total Nerd is a great way to start, because that's how I started. I think you have to sort of nerd out on the business to understand what you're going to have to do. And what they're doing is absolutely the right thing. The podcast part of it and what's being done at programs like here at Hillsborough give you a much greater advantage than what I had starting out. I started in high school at Franklin's Cable Access Station. By law, every cable system has to have one channel that's dedicated to the community. And so if you want to get on there and polka dance, then they're going to give you an opportunity to do that. I did my own show when I was a junior in high school. I called local basketball games, and that was how I got started. And what Drew and Ben are doing is the equivalent to that now on steroids, which is really exciting because you go to college And you have, when you have things already working for you, when you've already had reps, you're more comfortable. I mean, so many people think they want to do this, and then they do it a couple of times and they're not good at it, or people make fun of them. And so then they just shut it down. Well, I mean, you're going to be bad at first. You really are. But if you do it enough, you get better. And that's why WUTK, the college radio station at Tennessee, is the most important place in my career because I was there for nearly 2 years. I went on the radio virtually every day for 2 years. No one was listening. No one. No, I mean, the people who listen to college radio have it on in the background. But it's like shooting free throws. The more you practice, the better you get. And by the time I came out of there, I was far and away ahead of my peers because I'm still scared today when I go on the radio. There's still a nervousness. But you find a way to deal with it in a positive way, and you can get comfortable, and again, you figure out your voice, so to speak. And so that's why I think, this, what they're doing, will put them ahead, far ahead of where I ever was. But college radio, to me, it's the most important part of developing any broadcaster, even if you want to go into television. Because I set records, I read the weather, I did the news, mostly I did sports. But, you're not timed out. If you go a minute 20, no one cares. It's a different world. And you make relationships with people down there. I still have friends who didn't go into broadcasting who worked with me at the student radio station. And then I still have people that I worked with at WUTK who I know in the business who've been very successful. And student radio is very cool.
Hey, so we mentioned that you're in 5 Hall of Fames, and I know that you have like 20 or so Associated Press awards. So how has being so successful changed your outlook on your career?
I don't think of myself as so successful. I think you're battling for it every single day because you know that so many people want your job. You know so many people want to do what you do. That's the toughest thing about anything related to sports broadcasting is, think about it. And you know people like this. There's some people who say, well, I don't know what I want to do for a living, but I'm listening to games. I like sports. I played sports. And I'm listening to that guy on TV. He didn't know what he's talking about, so I could do that. The truth is, he could. This job is not hard. It's talking. It's not hard. Most people can absolutely talk. Now, you start off with a lot of people who are thinking that, especially a lot of guys. Most of the girls who go into it have a much more realistic viewpoint, which gives them a better chance. But a lot of guys think they can do this. And so suddenly they start into it and they realize right off the bat it's a little more complicated. Because yes, anybody can do it, but not everybody can do it well. Still, along come people along the lines who want to do your job. These two right here, they're going to come along and they're going to be more experienced and more trained, and they're going to come out of college better than I was, and there are always people down the line. And so you're fighting for it every day. If you're not fighting for it every day, you lose it. So I don't think you stop and think about this is this, or this is what I am, or this is who, this is my thing. You're doing a job, man. The people who do it well, it's even like Jim Nance. Jim Nance from CBS Sports lives here. And Jim Nance is still doing the job every single day at 61 years old. He's not thinking I'm Jim Nance. He's thinking I got to be ready for this NFL game. I've got to be ready for the Masters. I've got to be ready for this appearance. And I mean, maybe at a certain point you sit down and take stock when it's over. But I think if you want to keep doing it, you never do that. Not at least till it is over. And it's generally not by your choice.
So when you talked about in the video and just preparing storylines and like things to talk about on air, how much time do you take like into your life to do that?
It's a lot because I got up really early this morning to read. I get up every morning to read various things. So things from Atlanta, things about us, things around the league, things in, I'm reading all the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce stuff. I mean, you're constantly trying to find what's connecting and trying to stay up to date with sort of everything that's going on. That probably takes more time than, say, preparing the Atlanta roster or anything to that extent. But it's a lot of reading. I study a lot more now than I did when I was in school. Had I studied this much in school, I'd probably been a doctor. But I'm glad I'm not. This reading is more fun, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, thanks for everybody coming, and thank you, Mr. Keith, again for joining us this afternoon. Please give it up for the 11 times.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
If you don't mind, just hang around, and then the bell will dismiss everybody to lunch. Thank you.